25 men, 1 woman, and just 24 hours to prove herself. In the shadowed heart of ancient Rome, inside a dim, smoky cell in the city's most notorious district, an extraordinary contest was unfolding. The Empress of the empire that ruled the known world had thrown down a challenge to Rome's most famous courtesan, who could satisfy more men before sunrise. The stakes weren't money. Status held no value here. This was raw, unfiltered competition. And what the Empress did that night would mark her destiny forever. Her name Valeria Messalina. By day she ruled alongside her husband. By night she walked a far more dangerous path, working as a prostitute. When her ambitions eventually went too far, her downfall would be so abrupt that historians still debate whether the accounts were even humanly possible or the most brutal character assassination ever recorded. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about power, desire, and the dark side of Rome. Before we delve behind the palace doors, make sure you're subscribed, because what follows will reshape your understanding of ancient Rome. Smash that like button if you've ever wondered how much of recorded history is propaganda. Comment below what shocks you most in this tale. The story is drawn from multiple ancient sources. Tacitus, Suetonius, Juvenal, and Pliny the Elder, all writing within decades of the events, when eyewitnesses were still alive. Modern historians have spent centuries trying to sift fact from political fiction, and the reality somehow both less outrageous and far more fascinating than the legends suggest. Rome glimmers under the Mediterranean sun. Marble temples shine white, yet in the darkened corridors of the imperial palace, shadows gather. Emperor Caligula's reign has descended into chaos. Executions are daily events. Paranoia poisons every word spoken. Survival demands appearing harmless, invisible, irrelevant. In a lesser wing of the palace lives Claudius, Caligula's uncle. At 47, every aspect of him exudes weakness. He stammers. He drags a leg. Saliva sometimes escapes his lips mid-sentence. For decades, his own family has dismissed him, keeping him away from politics, believing him too simple-minded to matter. That assumption would, ironically, save his life. Across the city, in a mansion worthy of Rome's ancient aristocracy, resides 15-year-old Valeria Messalina. Descended from Augustus's sister, her lineage is as prestigious as Rome gets. Ancient accounts describe her strikingly dark hair, pale skin, perfect Roman features. Yet it is not just her beauty that captivates, its intensity. Her gaze feels piercing, as if she's weighing and judging everyone she meets. Ambitious and clever, her future is about to be decided without her consent. Among Rome's elite, marriages are political instruments, not matters of love. When Caligula arranges Messalina's marriage to Claudius, no one expects much. Claudius would never rule. This union merely keeps her close to power, ensures imperial offspring, and solves a minor political dilemma. The girl has no voice. At 15, she is told she will marry a man 3 decades older, unappealing to her, and that is the end of it. The wedding night married to a drooling, stammering man must have been traumatic, though Roman culture rarely acknowledged such experiences. Then, just 3 years later, everything changes. Caligula is assassinated by his guards in 41 CE. Chaos erupts. Who will lead Rome? Soldiers find Claudius hiding, trembling behind a curtain. Almost mockingly, they proclaim him emperor. Suddenly, the man everyone dismissed as weak rules the greatest empire in history. And Valeria Messalina, barely 18, becomes empress. Little did anyone know this teenage empress would become infamous in Roman history. Her name synonymous with sexual excess, so extreme that 2,000 years later, it still fascinates. Imagine being Messalina. You're 18. Your husband is emperor, nearly 50. Physically unremarkable and apparently disinterested in passion. You command immense wealth, have thousands of servants, and access to every pleasure Rome can offer. 2 children secure your position. What would you do with absolute power and relentless boredom? According to ancient sources, Messalina began slipping out of the palace at night. She disguised herself with a blonde wig, wore ordinary clothes, and roamed the streets with only a trusted attendant. Guards noticed but dared not intervene. She was the empress confronting her risked death. Her destination, the suburb. Rome's infamous red light district, where prostitutes worked in tiny cells for sailors and travelers seeking pleasure. Tacitus and Suetonius report that Messalina herself worked in a brothel under the alias Lisa, meaning shadow. She paid for the room, offering her services to clients oblivious to her imperial identity. The psychology is staggering. This was not forced. This was choice, not financial necessity. She had the empire's wealth. Sometimes she charged, sometimes she did not. The motive? Something far darker and more complex than money. If this shocks you, hit that like button, because the story of 25 men in one night is coming, and it's even more unbelievable. By day, Messalina performed perfectly, attending state functions, receiving dignitaries, managing the palace with efficiency and dignity. No one suspected that hours later she would be in the suburb attending to clients in a prostitute cell. But anonymity alone could not satisfy her. Ancient sources describe increasingly decadent palace parties, orgies, where senators and their wives perform sexual acts on command, sometimes coerced under her supervision. To refuse such an invitation was to risk disgrace or worse. Guests arrived nervous, leaving the gathering bound to Messalina by shared guilt and unspoken shame. The guest list read like a roll call of Rome's power elite. Senators angling for favor, generals seeking promotions, merchants chasing lucrative contracts. Once someone attended one of Messalina's parties, she held sway over them, opposing her risked exposure of their own secret indulgences. It was political manipulation through hedonism and astonishingly effective. Claudius seemed either unaware or deliberately indifferent. His freedmen advisors, former slaves elevated to positions of extraordinary influence, watched Messalina carefully, documenting her every move, waiting for the perfect moment. Narcissus and Pallas, the empire's most powerful men after Claudius, understood that Messalina's influence threatened Rome's stability, but acting against an empress required impeccable timing and undeniable proof. Around them, the forces of disaster quietly aligned. Then came the event that would immortalize Messalina's name for 2,000 years. Pliny the Elder, writing in his natural history mere decades after her death, records it plainly. Messalina challenged Sulla, Rome's most celebrated courtesan, to see who could satisfy the most men in a single day. Picture it. 2 women, one the empress in disguise, the other a professional sex worker engaged in what might be history's most bizarre contest. Sources vary on the exact numbers. Some claim 25 men, others suggest higher, yet all agree on one point. Messalina won, continuing long after Sulla admitted defeat. The physical logistics are almost impossible to comprehend. 25 men in 24 hours equals a new partner roughly every hour with no breaks for food, rest, or recovery. From a modern medical standpoint, such exertion would be devastating. Did it happen exactly as described? Historians remain skeptical. But the story appears across independent sources, suggesting Romans believed their empress had done something extraordinarily scandalous, publicly competing with prostitutes in sexual excess. What drives such behavior? Modern psychology might point to hypersexuality disorder, intrusive compulsive sexual thoughts escalating despite consequences, normal satisfaction unattainable, behavior spiraling out of control.
Ancient accounts of Messalina fit this pattern perfectly. Insatiable, escalating, uncontrollable. Roman medicine, of course, had no understanding of psychological conditions, attributing excessive female desire to hysteria supposedly caused by a womb wandering through the body. Remedies were limited to herbs or diet, entirely missing the underlying issue. Messalina was trapped in cycles of behavior she may not have fully understood or controlled in a society that offered neither treatment nor empathy. Back at the palace, her actions became impossible to conceal. Rumors spread across the streets of Rome. Ordinary citizens gossiped about sightings in the suburb. Senators whispered about her parties. The scandal grew, yet Claudius remained isolated, seemingly oblivious. Narcissus and Pallas watched, biding their time. Messalina had antagonized countless enemies through executions, ruined rivals, and public humiliations. Each waited for their chance to strike. Then in 48 CE, she made a decision that would seal her fate. Messalina fell in love not with her emperor husband, not with the anonymous clients of her nocturnal escapades, but with Gaius Silius, said to be the most handsome man in Rome. Senator, wealthy, charming, politically ambitious, their affair was known, yet what happened next defies reason. While Claudius was away at the port of Ostia overseeing grain shipments, Messalina married Silius publicly. A full Roman wedding, witnesses, contracts, bridal attire, religious rites, and hundreds of guests. Tacitus recounts the celebration in her gardens with senators and aristocrats present, music playing, feasting underway, her motivation. Ancient sources suggest two possibilities. Either years of unchecked behavior had disconnected her from reality, or she attempted a coup, intending to replace Claudius with Silius as emperor. Either scenario requires understanding that Messalina's judgment had become dangerously impaired. Imagine being a guest at this wedding. Attend and you witness an act of possible treason, refuge, and risk angering the empress, whose reputation for vengeance was legendary. Many attended, either hoping the coup would succeed or too terrified to decline. The ceremony continued. Music, wine, ritualized proceedings, theatrical displays of intimacy. Some sources claim the marriage was consummated publicly or staged to appear so. This was not subtle political maneuvering. It was audacious, bordering on madness. Reports eventually reached Claudius in Ostia. His freedmen presented evidence that seemed impossible. His wife had wed another man in a ceremony attended by half the Senate. Claudius refused to believe it at first, requiring multiple witnesses and signed documents before reality sank in. Narcissus recognized the moment. Messalina had given them irrefutable grounds to act. A counter-coup was set in motion. Narcissus seized control of the Taurian guard, marching toward Rome. Meanwhile, Messalina continued celebrating, unaware or indifferent to the looming disaster. Her rivalry ended abruptly when messengers brought word. Claudius was returning, fully aware of her actions. Sobered instantly, she grasped the consequences. Execution awaited her, Silius, and all connected to the wedding. In desperation, she attempted one final manipulation. Gathering her children, Britannicus and Octavia, she sought to meet Claudius, hoping their presence would soften his wrath. But Narcissus intercepted her, warning that her beauty and tears would undo Claudius's resolve. He physically prevented the encounter. Silius faced execution first. No resistance, no pleas, only a request for a swift death, which he received the same day. Guests from the wedding were hunted down, some executed outright, others forced to commit suicide to avoid imperial retribution. The purge swept through Rome's elite, erasing anyone connected to Messalina's audacious final act. Messalina retreated to the gardens of Lucales, an estate she had seized years earlier through political maneuvering, accusations, and executions. Ironically, the estate she had claimed would become her final prison. With her was her mother, Lepida, largely absent for most of Messalina's life, now present at the end. Ancient accounts described the young empress's mental state as volatile, swinging between rage and despair, panic, and an almost eerie calm. She attempted to write a plea to Claudius, but could not find the words. She considered ending her own life, but courage failed her. Fear held her even as death approached. How does one process the fall from absolute power to condemned prisoner in a single day? After 7 years of shaping Rome to her will, she now sat in a garden with nowhere to hide. Narcissus would not leave her fate to Claudius. He knew the emperor might be swayed by her tears, might grant her mercy if he saw her weeping and her children. So he dispatched a tribune and a centurion with strict instructions, kill her immediately. They found Messalina with her mother, a dagger trembling in her hand. The tribune hesitated, offering her the chance to end her own life and preserve some dignity. She could not, even facing certain death. Courage deserted her. Lepida urged her daughter to act, to take her life rather than be executed like any ordinary criminal. Messalina froze, caught between pride and terror. Finally, the tribune's patience ran out. He stepped forward and delivered the fatal blow. Messalina died at 22 in the garden she had seized years earlier, felled by the same imperial machinery she once controlled. Lepida remained, performing one final act of maternal love, arranging her daughter's body, closing her eyes, restoring what little dignity death allowed. After that, she vanished from history. Claudius was dining when news arrived. According to Suetonius, he showed no emotion, neither grief nor satisfaction. He continued his meal, called for more wine as if nothing remarkable had occurred. 0 years later, historians still debate what truly happened. Ancient sources are deeply biased. Tacitus, writing 50 years later, was a moralist who cast Messalina as a cautionary tale of female depravity and imperial corruption. Juvenal was a sadist, exaggerating for effect rather than accuracy. Suetonius thrived on scandal, indifferent to verification. Plenty repeated tales he had heard not witnessed. Modern historians have tried to separate propaganda from fact. The consensus suggests Messalina did engage in scandalous sexual behavior. The general pattern of excess is likely accurate. It led directly to her execution, but specific details, the brothel, the 25-men contest, the exact nature of palace orgies may have been exaggerated or entirely invented. Why the exaggeration? After her death, Claudius married Agrena the Younger, Nero's mother, who sought to control historical narratives, portraying Messalina as monstrous, made Agrena appear virtuous. By contrast, most surviving accounts were written during or after Nero's reign. When Agrena's faction dictated what was recorded or buried, feminist historians have asked why Messalina's sexual behavior became legendary while male emperors committed comparable or worse acts. With little censure, Caligula allegedly engaged in incest and rape. Nero forced senators to witness sexual assaults on their wives. Tiberius reportedly maintained villas for molesting children. Yet Messalina's reputation for sexual depravity surpasses all of them. Why? Because female sexual agency terrified Romans more than male sexual violence. A man exercising power through sex was normalized, even admired. A woman actively pursuing sexual pleasure, controlling men, choosing her own partners, violated every assumption about Roman gender roles. Messalina had to be destroyed not only politically, but historically turned into a cautionary tale to deter female autonomy for centuries. What does her story teach us? At its core, it's about how women's sexuality has been policed, punished, and weaponized. Male sexual abuse reinforces dominance. Female sexual agency challenges the hierarchy. Roman sources could not tolerate such a challenge. They created a monster whose story would echo for millennia. But consider this. How much of history reflects truth versus the narrative of those in power? Messalina left no writings of her own. We have no record of her perspective, her intentions, or understanding of her actions. Only accounts by her enemies survive after her death, and with no chance of defense. Think about what she truly had. An arranged marriage at 15 to a man she found repulsive nominal power despite the title of empress and a society that left women almost no outlets for ambition, intellect, or sexual desire. If she did act with sexual excess, it might have been the only way to assert control over her body, her choices, and her life. Her children suffered the consequences. Britannicus would be poisoned by Nero. Octavia was forced into a miserable marriage with him and later executed. Both were forever marked by association with Rome's most infamous empress. Meanwhile, Narcissus and Pallas amassed wealth and influence, effectively ruling the empire for years. Her fall was a